Hello and welcome back to AP World History Modern. Today we are going to begin day 8, our final day, on Unit 5.2, and specifically targeting in on the Latin American revolutions. So, once again, we're looking for things, we're looking for causation, right? That is our learning objective today. The skill we're trying to apply throughout 5.2 is for looking for causes and effects of the revolutions, right? So today we're going to be looking at specifically the Mexican Revolution and some of the northern South American ones. So Venezuela, Colombia, or Grand Colombia. All right, so let's just once again do a little contextual overview here. We're going to be looking at the revolutions that happened in Latin America, and of course this is all happening within the context of these earlier Atlantic revolutions now, right? So of course the American Revolution is gonna be the one that sparks this off. But of course, if you're talking about Latin America, contextually speaking, you can't get away from the French Revolution, because the fourth stage of the French Revolution, or fourth phase, or the Napoleonic phase of the French Revolution, is going to result in the Peninsular War, right? And the Peninsular War, which will start around 1807 into 1808. And the Peninsular War is going to overthrow the Spanish monarch. The Portuguese monarch is going to flee to Brazil. But of course, it's the loss of the Spanish monarch, and Napoleon installing his brother-in-law on the Spanish throne, and we're going to see almost an immediate spark take place in South America and in Mexico. So 1809, we see Ecuador, Gran Colombia, Argentine, and by 1810, of course, Mexico is also 1810, right, with Miguel Hidalgo, and of course Venezuela by 1811. All right, so it's when you look at causation, like there's bigger, right, contextual things going on here. All right, so and then kind of looking, this is when these revolutions wrap up. All right, so when they happen and when they wrap up. All right, so let's kind of run through and let's talk about a couple of little quick case studies. And generally, when you're talking about South America, in Venezuela, you're gonna inevitably look at Simon Bolivar, right? So born in Caracas, right, the viceroyalty of New Granada, and he's born as he's a criollos, born into a wealthy criollos family. His family owned a copper mine, right? Wealthy from the copper industry. And as typical with upper class criollos, he was educated in Europe, so he'd gone to Spain for an education, and was actually physically present, during Napoleon's crowning, and will come home and bring with him the some of these radical ideas from the French Revolution with him. Right, so we'll eventually be involved in the establishment of the Republic of Venezuela, which then will be retaken by the Spanish, and then that will result him fleeing to Jamaica. It's while he is in Jamaica, which is a British colony, right? While he's in Jamaica, he writes his very famous Jamaica letter, or letter from Jamaica, and we'll look at that in a second. Right, so Jamaica. Right, eventually goes to Haiti, befriends the president, and returns with troops, right, Haitian troops, and will eventually win independence and establish Gran Colombia, and will eventually defeat the Spanish in Ecuador, help unify them into Gran Colombia, meets up with Jose de San Martin, so coming up from Argentina, right, to the north, and meets up with him in Peru. Right, so, and of course Bolivia, right, who's is the namesake of Simon Bolivar. He never actually stepped foot in, right? But so if you want to know, this is San Martin, right, Jose de San Martin, and so just a little blurb about him, although I don't really want to flush him out today. All right, so So meets up with San Martin, and and they are they will declare the victory, and they will sign treaties. All right. Slavery gets ended, right, once Bolivar comes back from Jamaica, right, from his exile, or from Haiti, or both, right? And of course, once independence is declared, and once once Spain is gone from South America, there's going to be a major debate, and should these right, newly independent former colonies, should they be united? Right? Should they be united into a United States of South America, or should they become independent? And Simon Bolivar will argue for centralization. He will argue for a system similar to the United States of America, right? And but eventually he will lose this argument. So he's unable to control the different factions that rise up, and and South America will dissolve into its current political boundaries. All right. All right. As far as the Jamaica letter, so once again, we need to make sure we are always paying attention to the connections to the Enlightenment and the application of these Enlightenment ideals. All right. So quick context here. In this letter, we got Bolivar analyzing what until this time had been considered historical success in the struggle of liberty in the America, right, justifies the Spanish Americans in their decisions for independence, right, and addresses the necessity for the union of the countries of the Americas, right. So, dear sir, this is the quote. Dear sir, the veil has been torn asunder. We've already seen the light, right, and it's not our desire to thrust back into the darkness. The chains have been broken. We have been freed. Right, and now our enemies seek to enslave us anew. So they had in Venezuela, they had already won independence, and the Spanish came and reasserted themselves, and he's up in Jamaica now writing this. Right, so they want to enslave us anew. That's what that's referring to. For this reason, America fights desperately, right, and seldom has desperation failed to achieve victory. You could definitely make an argument on that point. Right, the role of the inhabitants of the American hemisphere has for centuries been purely passive. Politically, they were non-existent, right? We are still in a position lower than slavery, and therefore it's more difficult for us to rise to the enjoyment of our freedoms. A people is therefore enslaved when a government, by its nature and its vices, infringes upon and usurps the rights of the citizens or subjects. Applying these principles, we find that America was denied not only its freedom, but even an active and effective tyranny. Let me explain. Under absolutism, there are no recognized limits to the exercise of governmental powers, right? And what he's referring to here, and this is something that we had discussed in class already when you had your Enlightenment documents assignment. But one of the realities of Latin America is that government or political decision-making ability in the Spanish colonies in Latin America comes from the crown. Right, and if you are not a peninsularis, right, remember those social hierarchies that are created. If you are not a peninsularis, then you cannot achieve the highest positions of power within the colonies, right? So criollos, while they are favored in society and can definitely become extremely wealthy, there's not self-government, right, amongst the criollos class. So that kind of stuff only is true for peninsularis, or people who were born on the Iberian Peninsula. So that's what he's referring to. There's no tradition, right? And he's, and obviously there's a comparison, at least in my mind, when I read this, being made to the United States. The United States of America, when we declare our independence, we have a tradition, a legislative tradition in the colonies. The colonies were allowed self-rule. And so when the revolution comes and independence is finally achieved, there is a tradition already in place of self-rule. That is not true in the Latin American colonies, right? So that is how I'm seeing this. Is he's simply saying that they have never had self-government, so self-government is difficult, all right? And so we have been harassed by a conduct that has not only deprived us of our rights, right? So once again, here talking about the right to self-rule, natural rights, So John Locke, we see that connection now, but has kept us in a sort of permanent infancy with regard to public affairs. If we could at least have managed our domestic affairs in our internal administration, like what had been done in the North American colonies, we could have acquainted ourselves with the processes and mechanics of public affairs. So, he's laying out here this issue of self-rule and the fact that they have not been able to have self-rule. So, if you're looking to make a good Enlightenment connection here, we're seeing John Locke, right? That they have been deprived of the kinds of natural rights that John Locke has discussed. Okay, so there's your kind of Enlightenment connection here. All right, we're gonna watch a little video clip here. So this is from a film that was made on this, and so this is gonna run for a few minutes. Ooh, I really want to show you 20 minutes worth of this. How about this? How about I will share this on Google Classroom. And if you don't see it there, please ask, and I'll make sure I share the link. So, but just this is from Librador. We'll watch just a minute of it, and then you can watch the rest on your own. All right, and of course, this becomes one of the arguments you'll hear over and over in the last couple hundred years is if you do not have a strong and unified country, then you're going to fall victim to the more powerful nations and groups around the world. I mean, this is part of the justification for the creation of the European Union, is to allow the EU to negotiate on from a stronger position against countries like the United States, right? So, and this is the argument that's being made by Simon Bolivar, is that they need to have, once these colonial divisions are gone, right? Why not have a United States of South America, right? That would look like basically from Venezuela, down through Argentina, right? And based or in other words, everything with the exception of Brazil and right in the Guyanas, right? So because these were not under Spanish control, so these are not part of these initial revolutions, right? So this is the argument that they're made, and that was a little excerpt of Simon Bolivar's belief on this. But obviously, Simon Bolivar did not win this one, and South America has remained a fragmented continent. All right. So, and this is just another map I have that I came across here. So this is what Latin America looked like in 1830. So around the time of Simon Bolivar's death. Right. This is roughly what it looked like. So the current the current divisions all happened right around this time. So like Gran Colombia, this was the original state up until it dissolves into what it is today in the 1830s. All right. Obviously the British and the French Guyanas, right? But so yeah. And it looks like they kind of clean this up a little bit. So Patagonia, right, largely outside. And also notice South America or Central America here. So Panama is going to be part of Gran Colombia, and Panama would be part of Colombia, right? Once Gran Colombia dissolves, and Panama will be part of that until the beginning of the 20th century. And that's that is a story we'll deal with later, right? And also notice Central America, right? The United Provinces of Central America. So from 1823 until 1839, right? This is going to be a United Provinces And then in 1839, Central America will then fragment into its current political boundaries. All right, so let's talk for a minute on Mexico, right? And so Father Miguel Hidalgo, right? So Hidalgo himself, let's do a quick little case study. Born into a Criollos family in Mexico. Father was a hacienda manager. Educated at the University of Mexico. So knew Latin, Hoto, the Mexicas language, French, right? Able to read the Enlightenment work. And of course, this is why he will eventually be fired. So he was dean at the university, but he'll be fired for reading this illegal material. The Enlightenment thinkers. And of course, he's famous for his Grito de Dolores, or the cry of Dolores, right? So in essence, when he gets kicked out of his university position, he becomes a local village parish priest. And the Grito de Dolores is thought to be an Enlightenment speech. So encouraging people to revolt, against the viceroyalty in the name of Catholicism. So a hybridization of Enlightenment thought with Christian Roman Catholic theology. All right. So I guess you could call Father Miguel Hidalgo the first of the liberation theologists, which is a concept we'll have to talk about in the springtime. All right, so causes, right? Spanish mercantilism. Spain exploited Mexico for labor, and of course, its resources, primarily silver, is one of the biggest resources. All right, but drought and famine, right, also going to cause some underlying revolutionary issues, which make people likely to revolt, right? And Spain refused to release its stores to the population. All right, so we do see this grito, right, come out. All right, so let me just pause it here for a second. You can read. Sorry. All right, and then we're going to watch a quick little film clip. So every September 15th at 11 a.m., the president of Mexico recites a version, right, because we don't know the exact verbiage of it, of the Grito de Dolores, right, at the National Palace in Mexico City. Right, anything rings a bell.
Mexicanos, ¡viva la independencia! ¡Viva Miguel Hidalgo y Costilla! ¡Viva José María Morelos y Pavón! ¡Viva Josefa Ortiz de Domínguez! ¡Viva Ignacio Allende! ¡Viva Leona Vicario! ¡Viva las madres y los padres de nuestra patria! ¡Vivan los héroes anónimos! ¡Viva el heroico ¡Viva la democracia! ¡Viva nuestra soberanía! ¡Viva la fraternidad universal! ¡Viva la paz! ¡Viva la grandeza cultural de México! ¡Viva México! ¡Viva México! ¡Viva México!
All right, so, and there's your translations. I probably should have put that up there before. All right. Let me. All right, so this is our spark for the Mexican Revolution. And I did come across this as well, which is kind of an interesting kind of way of looking at the Mexican Revolution. So this is a history. This is a history of Mexico City using a mural from the National Palace in Mexico City. So the mural was painted by Diego Rivera. Right, and so I'm going to start because it runs through the history of Mexico, and I'm going to start more with the
diseases brought to the New World by the Spanish.
With Father Miguel Hidalgo.
The panel below depicts the enslaved Aztecs growing and producing various foods brought to America from Europe.
So we'll start here.
This blue-eyed baby carried on the back of an Aztec concubine of a conquistador depicts rapid genetic assimilation. In the background, we see that every aspect of the colonization of the New World was facilitated by the total enslavement of the entire population. Even as the natives were being forced into slavery, they were also being forced into accepting the religious doctrine of their captors. Within little more than an instant, virtually the entire civilization was lost. Coming up the grand stairwell from the ground level of the National Palace is a depiction of the 400 years of Mexican history after the invasion by the Spanish in 1519. Each of the 7 arches in the grand staircase depict a monumental event in Mexican history. The arch on the right shows the Aztec Empire as it was just before the arrival of the Spanish. The next arch shows the invasion of Mexico by the United States in 1847. Followed by the drafting of the Mexican Constitution in 1857. The central arch shows the major figures after the War of Independence in 1810. The next arch shows the major figures of the Mexican Revolution between 1910 and 1920, followed by an arch depicting the Mexican repulsion of the French forces in 1862. And the 7th arch depicts Diego Rivera's vision of how the protests in the 1920s would lead to a bright socialist future. The sun was painted upside down over the pyramid to depict the decline of the empire. The lower part of the first panel depicts the internal divisions among the native groups surrounding Tenochtitlan in the time just prior to the Spanish invasion. While being enslaved using all methods of torture and intimidation, overpowered technologically, disintegrated culturally, starved physically, the natives were also forced to accept the religion of their captors and pay an endless tribute. Until ultimately, Tenochtitlan, one of the largest and most prosperous cities in the entire world, was disassembled brick by brick by its own citizens. And so this is the theme of the central wall and the grand staircase of the National Palace, how Mexican history rests figuratively and literally on the foundations of the Aztec Empire. In the middle of the central arch is the Catholic priest Miguel Hidalgo.
Okay, so that was a whole lot of contextual background for you. All right, so here's the little blurb on Father Miguel Hidalgo and the spark of the Mexican Revolution.
He began the Mexican War of Independence in 1810 by starting a revolt that inspired nearly 90,000 poor farmers to take up arms against the Spanish. Agustin Iturbide, a general in the Mexican army, ended the War of Independence by taking control of Mexico City in 1821. He then became president and was later declared emperor of Mexico.
Right, so, right, Iturbe, when you talk about the Mexican Revolution, so it begins in 1810, and of course, Father Miguel Hidalgo is captured on his way to Mexico City, and he is executed by firing squad in 1811. So he is not gonna obviously live to see the revolution come to an end. But when the revolution does come to an end in 1820, you're going to see the rise of an emperor. All right.
Vicente Guerrero took over as second president of Mexico in a coup against Agustin.
So we see a coup d'etat. Right.
After serving as general in the war, he played a key role in giving citizenship to all inhabitants of Mexico, independent of race or skin color, and created public schools. Emiliano Zapata, top left, Pancho Villa, also in sombrero, and Pascual Orozco, holding the lower end of the Land and Liberty flag, were all allies and leading figures in the Mexican Revolution almost 100 years later.
Right, so this is a huge jump, right? So they've just gone from, from this initial revolution to overthrow colonization, in the basic structure. And now we're jumping 100 years into the future, and we're talking about this other Mexican revolution. So let's just kind of hit this, because this is a revolution you're also going to be responsible for. So let's just kind of scroll back a little bit and just kind of make sure we pick up those names.
And created public schools. Emiliano Zapata.
So Zapata, right? Emiliano Zapata.
Pancho Villa, also in sombrero.
Pancho Villa, right? So Zapata, Pancho Villa.
And Pascual Orozco, holding
Pascual Orozco.
The lower end of the Land and Liberty flag, were all allies and leading figures in the Mexican Revolution almost 100 years later. They each saw relentless opposition from General Alvaro Obregón during the revolution, became 39th president of Mexico, and later was succeeded by Calles, who founded the party that was to rule Mexico for 70 years.
All right, let's stop there, because we're getting into the 20th century at this point. So this is a revolution that will take place largely during World War I. All right. All right, so let's go back. All right, so what I did here is I kind of broke down what they skipped over, or just kind of grouped it by revolutions. All right, so or coup d'états and new regimes being put into place. So we have this period of the revolution, and then we see Augustine, the Iturbide, will declare himself emperor, and the church will line up behind him. So we see this kind of first empire, right? Or an emperor is what replaces the king or the monarch, right? And then there's a coup d'état, and then we see the establishment of the first French Republic. And of course, there's another coup d'état, which will result in Guerrero. So, in that little film, they kind of jump a little bit. So they jump all the way from Augustine, all the way to Guerrero, right, in 29. So it's in 29 in that coup d'état that we see the extension of citizenship regardless of race, in the establishment of public education, right, in Mexico. But this is going to run us through to the time we get to the Mexican Revolution, and you're going to see a number of different republics. Every one of these republics represents an overthrow of the regime, new constitutions, and of course, if you want to kind of do a little contextual background here, this is one of the primary issues that we see with Mexico's inability, to have a consistent government, right, is going to certainly impact their future, right? And I guess what I mean by that is, if you look at like some of these problems that they have here, like we see going from the centrist republic and we have this coup d'etat and the establishment of the Second Federal Republic. Well, it's in the wake of this that we're going to have the Mexican-American War, right? So you have, the United States is definitely going to take advantage of this, of this weakness. And it's also during the U.S. Civil War, that you're going to have another coup d'etat, and of course during the U.S. Civil War, you also have France taking advantage of this as well. So France will invade. So you got people who are, foreign countries who are taking advantage of this situation, of lack of stability. The United States in this case, France, right? France in this case, and not making the situation any better for them. All right. So, and of course, the United States couldn't do anything about this because we were fighting the Civil War. All right. So. And I don't know enough about U.S. history to even know if we would have done anything about a French invasion. One would expect that we would, I guess, given the Monroe Doctrine, right, and the tenets of that. But that, like I said, I'm not positive on this, right? So just kind of show you how the United States benefits from this instability, right? And is of course the Mexican-American War. So this red line shows the northern border of Mexico before, before the Mexican-American War. So the United States, we will definitely pick up a lot of territory, and of course keep in mind that we also picked up the Louisiana Purchase during the Haitian Revolution. So these revolutions and these coups d'etats are definitely going to benefit the United States. As we make our westward expansion and fulfill that notion of manifest destiny. All right, so one of the very first things I did at the beginning of the year is, I like to kind of show this. And of course, one of the realities that we need to keep in mind is through all of these, different republics and regimes, you are going to see a maintenance of the church as having a central position in Mexico, and you're also going to see criollos maintaining their social position within society, regardless of the form of government that is in place. All right, so even after these more socialist types of revolutions, and the establishment of very real socialist practices, during the 1930s and 40s and 50s, you're going to see a movement back away from those, and at the end of the day, the social hierarchies that were in existence during the colonial era will persist into the modern day. All right. So, and keep in mind, I just mentioned the Monroe Doctrine, so just as a little reminder for you, or if you're not familiar with this, because you didn't talk about this when you were in 8th grade, when the interests of the United States are involved, that the American continent, by a free and independent condition, which they have assumed to remain henceforth, shall not be considered a subject for any future colonization by any European powers. So, France coming in the 1860s was an obvious violation of this. However, of course, if you're looking for a positive on this, we now have Cinco de Mayo as a result of that French invasion. So there is in fact that. All right, so let's wrap this up. So the Atlantic revolutions are interconnected. Enlightenment provides the intellectual foundations and justifications for these revolts, and the American Revolution will result in the French Revolution, and the French Revolution is going to directly lead to the Haitian Revolution, and the Haitian American and French Revolution will result in the Latin American revolutionary movements, right? So specifically, remember the Enlightenment ideals of individual rights in self-government, and obviously Locke is going to become the big story here, right? Locke, self-government, Locke, preservation of natural rights, life, liberty, property, Locke, right? When governments fail to preserve those natural rights, then people have a right to overthrow that regime. All right, so Locke, lock it in that Locke is the big name for this. Okay, so yeah, I think we are good. So please remember to make sure you check those videos out at the bottom of the page, and because obviously they are way better than me, right? So that is all. Sapriati.